Hi, I am Scott Herbst, founder of Six Flex Training and Consulting, and you are listening to or watching The Flex. This is a show where we have conversations with people who are expressing leadership with the intention that it open access to you expressing yours. Really excited today to be talking to Holli Beth Clauser. This conversation's a little bit out of the ordinary for me. Holli is the founder of ABA C.A.R.E.S, and they do a couple things. One, they put on the only leadership summit that is exclusively focused on workforce development and solving operational challenges in the world of behavioral health. But also, Holli works with, doesn't do recruiting so much for organizations as works with teams to develop their recruiting capacity. Holli, correct me anything where you'll correct me,
You're right.
but to develop their recruiting capacity. And why I invited Holli on the show today is because I found your approach really compelling, really I think valuable, but also like a little bit out of the box. So I really invited you to hear how you help companies develop their pipeline, their talent pipeline in a way that's really connected to the organization that they're committed to being and building and expressing themselves in the world. So Holli, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I remember we were chatting. We got connected through a mutual contact, and I think I sat in my car for about an hour longer than I meant to after picking up some food, but greatly enjoyed the conversation and could not get off, and have enjoyed nurturing our relationship since then. And so, yeah, thank you for having me on. I look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Um, yeah, likewise. And thanks for being here. So let's start there. One thing that what I loved is you started talking about how you help companies and I help them develop like their existing leaders and do very little around recruitment, onboard, etc. Um, and then I found a lot of uh like just our approach very compatible, right? So take us through however you want to do that, but take us through how you work with clients and the what I think is an unusual but really valuable approach to take in developing a talent pipeline.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. We do have a lot of synergy. I think, we focus so heavily on retention, and anything that I do with my clients has in the background, like, will this retain staff? And so I loved hearing about your leadership support too, because that's another gap that I see. But what we do is it really depends on the client and pinpointing where they're at and what they need. But typically, um, everybody is facing similar challenges. One of them is even pausing to identify who they are and what they need. It sounds so simple, but most often they're just copying and pasting, whatever chat put in the job description should be, or what they've seen other people do that seems to be successful, and then they add the same tagline that says we do ABA different. And that's pretty much, what they do. And then they post and pray, or potentially, they do some sourcing and things like that. But what I've seen is that there's usually a mismatch between what the reality of the job is specific to that company and what it looks like, and what the recruiter is conveying to the individual when they're speaking to them, and then even in your marketing or ads. So I do support some companies with recruitment marketing, making sure that they're getting the people in front of them that they need. And then I also go as granular as, how are you using your platforms to, again, pull in the amount of people that will get in front of you. So it seems counterintuitive. Sometimes my clients will see a dip in the amount of candidates, but they will see an increase in terms of the quality and the hires. But again, what I do does seem pretty counterintuitive, but my purpose is again retention. And when you focus on quality and not quantity, you get better results. So a large kind of like sweeping that's kind of what I do in the beginning. But where the real change happens is when I'm able to talk to the hiring managers or the recruiters and see how they're interviewing and be able to make changes there. I will give you a tip. If you
Can we,
listen to
can we
yeah,
I want to pause because I don't want
yeah,
to
please.
provide this
I'll
point.
just
But
keep
I think
going. Yeah.
it was really interesting to me, right?
Thanks.
Is that you said that you focus on helping identify who you are and what you need.
Mhm.
And I think that uh, most, I expect, I actually don't know this, I just don't get too much into the world of hiring, but I suspect that most companies, when they go out looking for someone, they skip that first step of like, well, who are we? And focus on, well, what do we need? And and then I'm guessing try to tailor their messaging and their ad, et cetera, to what they think they need. And then people show up and it's like they've kind of presented the thing to like bait people in
Mhm.
versus actually authentic, like really looking like authentically, well, like who are we? And who's going to thrive here? And what are we expecting from people that we think will thrive here? And
Mhm.
so, could you talk a little bit about the process of helping companies answer the question, well, who are we?
Yes. So you and I have kind of spoken about this in a different conversation where a lot of times when you ask somebody for virtue, like what their culture is or their values or their virtues or what they need from somebody, they say what people think that you're supposed to say, like
Yeah.
compassion or, we're looking for somebody that's playful and fun and it's kind of
Every
like this
company values integrity.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we value integrity. Yeah.
What does that look like?
Right.
So, and is it actually important to the job and how they function? And does it actually help you find the right candidate? So when I hear people say, one of our virtues is to have fun and we want somebody who's like bubbly and who is playful. And as an autistic, I know that that is not necessarily the right RBT to get in front of people. And that is not the only skill set. And when you look for somebody that's just compassionate and fun, you get somebody that you'd like to have, a beer with if you drink, which I don't, but somebody you want to hang out with and it feels good. But do they have the other qualities like resilience? And what does that mean? Are they going to be responsible in showing up? Do they have the fortitude to push through difficult situations? Are they advocates to be able to ask questions? Are they able to are they able to kind of bounce back, in terms of going through really difficult situations and showing up again and again and again? How's their professional level? Do they take feedback? And what does that look like if they do? So, like, really getting into what are the troubles? And part of how you can do this is talk to your supervisors and say, what are some things that you struggle with the RBTs that we have today? What does that look like? Are you finding that the people that we're bringing in are insensitive? Are you finding that this is their first job and they're not maybe reliable or they don't know how to approach things in a professional way? Like, what are things that you're struggling with? So then, and that's the first part is what are the things that you're struggling with? And so now we know the qualities of what we're looking for. And then where can you support them? So what are the things that you're struggling with, but that you're able to train them up? So then we can really get down to the nitty-gritty of not only what do you need, but what can you train and support as well? And not kind of live in this fantasy land that you can bring in anybody and just make it work because it's not working, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. What I hear there is that it's a focus on what does it really take to do the job,
Mhm.
and not just in terms of skill set, but really to succeed over time in an environment, whatever the environment. Maybe it's a clinic, like you got to be able to work with other people. Maybe it's in home, you got to function really well on your own, right?
Mhm.
But what are the bare requirements versus looking at, well, ideally, we want someone who's fun and this is what we want to be,
Mhm.
versus like the underlining component skills so that you can focus on who you want to be. It's almost like the must have and then the aspirations.
Mhm. Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, yeah, you're right. And then the follow-up is, can you evaluate that, and how do you evaluate that in an interview? But yeah, you're absolutely explaining it right.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, Perfect. And then you're welcome to talk about how you do that in an interview, but you were about to make another point before I cut you off.
Oh no, I think, in terms of um I think that I was gonna, perhaps pivot to the interview from that, is once you
Yeah.
identify that. And, something, something that you can listen for when you're to identify, are you guys doing that, is listen to your interviewers or look at it, and if they're
Yes.
talking more about your culture and selling selling the position or the company more than you're listening to the actual person talk, they're not evaluating anything. They're just selling. There is no actual like evaluation going on. They're just trying to convince the person in front of them because they need to hit a number, or because they like the person, whatever it is. But there's no true science being used, and hiring is a science. There is actual data that can help you improve how your hiring is working, and that starts with making sure that you have the questions and that you have the formulas to evaluate things in an appropriate way. And so the first thing you can do to see, besides looking at your numbers, which tells the story, if you have a turnover problem, you probably have an evaluation problem in your hiring system. And so you can pull that lever and fix that, and really see a huge impact. So yeah, I'll dive into the evaluation if that's okay for a little
Yeah,
bit.
please.
So I'll give you an example. There's many ways that you can ask a question that leads the person to the answer. So that's something to be aware of. So we coach on that. So for example, I could say to you, Scott, like, tell me at a time that you were really good at taking perspective, or tell me a time that you took perspective, and what was the result in that. And as somebody who's being interviewed, you hear, okay, they need to hear that I take perspective. Well, and what does that look like, right? Easy. But if you switch how you ask the question, you can throw them off a little bit enough to say, Scott, have you ever been in a situation where you've taken perspective? Sure. Yes, I have. Great. Tell me about a time where you took a perspective of somebody else, and then listen to them answer that. Take a pause and say, now tell me it from the other person's point of view. And then there you can start to really listen for cues on if they were able to process through that, and how they talk about the situation. You'd be surprised that people, even though they know what you're looking for, they're so thrown off that they will say things like, I mean, I guess I don't really understand, or, it was a pain for them, or it was, whatever, but they're not truly understanding the other person's perspective. So that's a way you could potentially listen for it. You can also have a rating scale that tells you if somebody's being vague, how to dig. So tell me more about that. Um, it kind of like we're doing, you're going to hear things and something might not sit with you, or you want to be able to define it a little bit more. If you're actively listening, you can hear when you're not able to evaluate what you're hearing. And if that's the case, give it one or two more times to try to get to what you're evaluating. And if you can't, they're probably missing that skill, and aren't able to do that. So again, evaluation is such a key
Like
component.
missing that skill of, say, perspective taking, or
Mhm.
whatever, taking initiative or planning ahead or taking feedback, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And one of my
Um,
favorite. Oh, go ahead. I get
Well,
excited.
that's really interesting. I love this. We're probably about to get nerdy here,
Let's
because
do it.
that's one of the things in my trainings I really focus on is actually developing listening skills.
Mhm.
And so if we can nerd out on that for a minute, I love that. I love that um, it's what you're saying, I think. So you would ask me, uh, can you think of a time you've taken perspective? I say yes, right? And then you say, cool, tell me about it. And I say, well, with my wife, actually, this happened fairly recently. We always fought before we'd go on trips. And finally, after we'd had the same fight probably a dozen times or more, um, I actually took her perspective. And one of the things she would complain about is that she doesn't want to have to tell me what to do to prepare to get to a trip. And I would always be frustrated because I'm like, well, then how do I know what you want done? Right. Um, but what I finally got when I took her perspective was that when she has to tell me what to do, or when I am relying on her to tell me what to do, then she feels like there's this mother child dynamic. And she doesn't want to be my mom. She wants to be my travel buddy. And and when I got that, then it was like, oh, and I could see her perspective. And then it was actually really easy to put in what would make a difference so that our communication going up right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Now, what I hadn't considered, and this is, I'm really interested in role playing this,
Yeah.
um, is what it would be like from her perspective. And I think from her perspective, for a long time, I think it was probably exasperation of like, why do I have to keep doing this? And why can't he just get it?
Mhm.
Um, and probably once I got it and adjusted my behavior, it was like two things, like a big relief and in two ways, I think. One way being like, oh, he gets it. But then two, like this release of pressure, like, oh, now he's really actually responding to my needs versus me like trying to pull it out of him and not getting it.
Mhm.
Like almost like a valve opening,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
And if I was interviewing you,
yeah,
I would pause here and say, Scott, like you shared a lot of introspection. I'm curious, and this is part of it too, is, getting curious. I'm curious if you're open to sharing how, since the time that you noticed that and had that conversation, have you guys traveled since?
yes.
And how has that gone different?
It like ridiculously crazy different in that um one, it actually so one, I saw exactly what to do. It was like, oh, well, we just need a travel checklist.
Mhm.
And we'll make a travel checklist. We'll sit down, we'll make a travel check. Everything that we would normally that you keep in your head, we're going to put on paper. And rather than you tell me what to do, I'm going to look at the checklist and pick things. Right.
Mhm.
Um, and and what blew my mind was that um sometimes sometimes depending on what we've got going on in our lives, like I'll do everything on the checklist.
Mhm.
Um, Not everything, but I'll take a lot that's on the checklist. There have been times, and by the way, we haven't hardly fought since then. And this
Great.
was honestly probably like a year ago. Um, Close to a year ago. We haven't fought since then. And there have been times where it's like she does everything on the checklist.
Mhm.
And and that's what surprises me is that even when she does everything, we don't fight. And mostly she does more of it. And
Interesting.
we don't fight, right? So I thought like, oh, she just wants me to do everything. And like, no, not at all. She just wants to feel like she doesn't have to nag me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and feel seen. And I just learned so much about your flexibility. I just learned about the fact that not only do you take somebody's perspective, but you take active change and that you reflect back. So just learned so much about you by being curious and that's, half of it. Is being genuinely interested in the person in front of them and how they behave and what drives their behavior.
Yes. Great. Now, what I can hear you doing is that I want to point to that for our listeners because I think that's valuable, not just in recruiting, hiring, but in like hugely valuable in coaching and behavior
Mhm.
change and like working with someone to say, hey, you keep making the same mistake. What's going on?
Mhm.
Right? Because
Mhm.
we've all been there where we have that same conversation with someone, walk away thinking, cool, like, and then they make the same, and we're like, and then we have it again. And it's like, why am I having the same conversation 5 times? But
Mhm.
so what you just said is really getting clear on how I see things at a few different levels. One being what motivates me and what's interesting to me. A second being, okay, how do I go about solving things and adjusting or
Mhm.
not, right?
Yeah.
Um, and was there anything else?
Yeah, I think that what you just pointed out is important, and the distinction in how I recruit is I am coaching the individual on the other side who's the candidate because they're
Yeah.
here for a reason. What they've been doing typically, I mean, maybe it's their first job, typically not, but what they've been doing isn't working for them. So I am
Hmm.
their career coach in
Yeah.
this situation. So I'm really trying to understand them. So at the end of the conversation, my goal is not to get you in my company. My goal is to make sure that you hear and like get out of the conversation what you need to get out of that. And if it is a good match, you'll feel that connection with me too and comfortable enough to come onto the company because as a recruiter, I'm the first person that you're meeting. I'm the face of the company, and you are truly getting me showing up for you as an individual in the best way possible. And it's such a different way of recruiting that is beneficial literally to everybody in the room. And as a recruiter, you feel so much better about what you do as a job versus being just like a people pusher, sales.
Yeah.
Um, you're really helping somebody on the other side.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, I just had a little light bulb go off.
Yeah, let me hear it.
I mean, well, it sounds like what you're doing as a recruiter, and this would apply anywhere, is really getting curious about, well, what does the world look like to them?
Mhm.
And because how the world looks to you will give you how you solve problems, right? Like I can tell you right now as I'm talking, I'm like, oh, that argument I had with for me, what was at the source of all of this repetitive argument with Carrie
Mhm.
is that how it looked to me is like she wants me to do all of it and to prove that I like, and she didn't want that at all, right?
Yeah.
um but if you get like my motivation is I'm afraid I'm going to have to do more and more and more and more, and it's never going to be enough, right? That
Yes.
like it's never going to be enough. That's how it was for me. um the argument makes a lot of sense because I've got to like protect myself so I don't get used up and like squeezed dry. Like, um,
Yeah.
and so that makes sense, my behavior.
Mhm.
But then when I actually get how the world looks to her, like, oh, she feels like she's got to be like, then her behavior makes perfect sense. And the solution opens right up. I'm rambling a little bit here. But
No.
I think here, yeah. So coming back, it's really about, okay, what does the world look like to them? And what do they really care about?
Mhm.
And if I can connect with that, um, and really see it. And I think that's the curiosity, like, um,
Mhm.
is like,
And
do I
mhm.
get it? Do I understand? Does it look clear to me? Right?
Yeah.
Um, is what enables then to make a really powerful choice of, oh, this sounds like a really great, like, I think you would love it here,
Mhm.
versus, yeah, I don't think you would like this job.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to be able to hear when they're telling themselves a story, right? And so
Talk
usually
about
when
that.
yeah, so usually when people are telling a story, every if it sounds too good to be true, it is. If they're using words like always, I never, that's usually a clue to say, well, let's dig into that more. So, for example, if you talk to somebody and you say, ideally, what does your ideal schedule look like in the perfect world? What hours would you like to work? And they're like, oh, I'm open, I'm pretty flexible. I can work really whenever the clients need, because like that's such a good interview like answer, right? Whatever.
Right.
But if you stop and you say, so what's the earliest? Like, let's start with the earliest. So, when do you like to wake up? Are you a morning person? Well, not really. Like, ideally, like maybe 8 or 9. Now we're starting to get somewhere. And then we can have more conversations like, okay, an ending, like, let's say that they're, working two jobs or they share responsibility for a child, whatever the situation is, you can start to say, okay, so if you get out of class at noon, do you really want to start at 12:30, or does it make sense not to? And the same thing applies for BCBAs who are talking about quality of life and work-life balance. Well, what does that mean to you specifically?
Yes.
And oftentimes they don't know. And so you have to really start to talk to them about their own personal values and what their life looks like within the lens of HR. I want to be really clear, like you can't ask about like ages of families or like their children
Right.
or any of those protected things, but
Yeah.
you can still ask questions to help them self-discover. And it's pretty cool when you see somebody learn so much about themselves in a 45-minute interview where they're like, "Oh yeah, you know what? That is my hard no." And you can have a conversation about it. It's pretty fun. Even though I don't do recruiting as much as anymore, I love being able to give this experience to other people because it's it's pretty rewarding to be on the opposite side and then seeing somebody get a job and actually watch them grow into themselves if you do it right, right?
Awesome. Um, it's it sounds like, I think, well, you can agree or disagree. Um, but it sounds like from the very get-go, like before you're even part of this company, that you're really listening for and looking out for this person's future. And in that sense, like providing them leadership, whether they go to work for you or not, or that's what you're training your clients to do.
Yeah, which is why I believe in in-house recruiting as much as possible. I can do an intake with you, I can do all of that, but to actually recruit super well with you with intention, I have to know all your blemishes and you're hiding them from me for the least the first 2 months that we're talking usually. And so it's hard for me to help you with retention on the recruitment side.
Mhm.
And that is my mission and my why. So I don't get a thrill when I make a hire I get a thrill when they stay and I know it's good. And that's why I've shifted from recruitment to recruitment training, because I believe that your retention is better, quite honestly, when you have it in house, and uh, there's more synergy in them understanding what your actual workplace and culture is like, and they're able to hire for your deficits and also hire to your strengths and be able to evaluate that accordingly. It just takes time with a third party recruiter. It's not impossible, but it's just typically better, I think, when it's done in house.
I'm curious about some of the more fine grain stuff. And when I say fine grain, I imagine that some of the needs, like you talk about helping a client discover who they are, some of it's kind of familiar across organizations, I expect, where, you got to be able to, um, I don't know how else to say this, but like be willing to be with a lot
Mhm.
as a line therapist for an ABA company, or like kids have behaviors, and sometimes the behaviors are messy, and it's not like you're filing papers, right? um so that's probably something everyone needs to have in common. Where do you find like the differences, and like helping companies discover and then communicate authentically what's unique to them?
It's a great question. Sometimes it's discovering strengths and sometimes it's discovering weaknesses. I'll talk about the weaknesses first and then the strengths. So,
Mhm.
if I'm helping an organization and I learn that they have leadership that are not great at feedback giving, or don't supervise, or that they're, we can look at some of your data and I can get that in terms of how often, what's your percentage of supervision, what does that look like, how often are they updating programming, how often are they, there's things that I can look at to see the success. How are your RBTs passing or your BTs passing the exam? What's the rate of that? What does that look like? So I can look to some true data to see, and take a pretty educated hypothesis of where some of your weaknesses are. And then when I'm interviewing, maybe, if your company isn't their strength is not training, then I'm listening for somebody who's going to be able to come in and not need that level of support. So,
Mm.
again, sometimes it's not that the person can't do the actual job of being a BT or RBT. It's that they're not going to do it well here,
Yeah.
because they need this. So I'm listening for that. Other things I'm listening for is, or looking for is, like, maybe you have a mentorship program and it is different from everybody else. You do a lot of BST. You make sure that you're also doing
BST
generalization.
is behavioral skills
Oh,
training. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. So you're doing that. I'm able to see that it's robust. We can see that in your pass rate. We can see that in your retention, and not pointing to it being a training or a mentorship problem. Then now I know that if I'm going and I'm talking to somebody who doesn't have the skills that you support, that's okay if they have the other things that we're looking for, because your company can support that need. And so, and not only that, I'm going to talk about that when we're talking and doing the job post. I'm also going to mention that to the candidate and blatantly and be like, you're new to this. However, what's great about this company is they do X, Y, and Z. And I'm not having to pitch. I don't have like a 5-minute pitch. The thing I hate the most, Scott, is when I show up and the company's like, yeah, we'll send you our 5-minute pitch that all our recruiters give. Cool. I'm going to tell you right now, I hate it. And I always hate it. Um, Listen to the conversation. And when you hear something that resonates, then you can say, oh, that's cool. Then I think you'll like it here because of X, Y, and Z. Or, oh, well, you might want to think, I don't, we're pretty good at this, but something to like think about it, if we move forward is this. And maybe we'll want to explore on if that's going to work for you. And that's again why it's so important, to invest in your recruiter training and invest in your leadership. I mean, you could the training that you do on active listening, invite the recruiters in, let them be a part of that. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be my training in recruitment, but you do have to give them the skills that are needed for sure.
And do you ever, just curious, do you ever, when you're working with a company, talk with them about their points that, like, maybe you want to develop this?
Mhm.
Like, this is something that probably is creating some problems for you, either in terms of people turning over or finding people who are going to stick around. I guess it's the same problem, two
Yeah.
sides.
It's delicate, but yes, I would say that something I also like to ask is who are your untouchables in the company before I start
Mhm.
consulting? I don't know if you run into this, Scott, but there's typically an untouchable, and sometimes the untouchable is the actual problem. And so we need to know what is going to happen if that is identified.
When you
And
say
what do we do?
untouchable, what do you mean?
Yeah, so unfireable, untouchable, like
Okay.
they're here no matter what. They can make everybody cry every day. It doesn't matter that you could identify and pinpoint that we lose 90% of our staff. I'm still not letting them go. They're my right-hand person.
Hmm.
Um, 9 times out of 10, it's HR, misplaced HR. Somebody shouldn't be in that situation. But yeah, so there are those moments, in the conversation if I go really deep into retention and I'm looking at every department, absolutely, I can pinpoint a lot of uncomfortable things that they might not be ready to work on, even
Yeah,
identifying leadership needs and things like that for sure.
yeah. Um, hey, we are getting near the end of the time we set aside, and
So quick.
I know it just goes by like that. You want to talk about your summit a little
Sure.
bit? I want to give you a chance to showcase that a bit.
Yeah, it's something I'm really proud of. It comes out of, necessity of noticing that there's not a tremendous a lot. I'm not saying there's not. There's really good, HR out there, and HR
Yeah.
support.
To talk a little bit about what it is and then why it is.
Sure. So we focus on there's 4 tracks that we have. We have an executive track, and in that track we're talking strategy, we're talking financial health, we're talking, all the things that you need in order to take care of your workforce. And then we have a clinical leadership track, and there we're identifying gaps that do affect recruitment or retention. We do focus on those skills. Like, for example, we're going to be going, Polly is going to be going over the 4 hats that a leader wears and things like that. And then we also have a people operations track, where we bring in experts who are going to, be addressing needs that are not talked about, or skills that you might not have in your organization there. And then we have a career counseling track as well to help give the skills to the individuals so that they can be more satisfied at their job. I think that, Scott, you're going to be coming and talking. We're still nailing down exactly what, so stay tuned. That. But it's going to be looking at helping an individual so that they can take their ownership too and accountability. So this summit, the theme that we came up with is alignment, because people need to be aligned with themselves, their company. Just alignment just makes sense, and that's really what we're trying to do. Is we're helping the individual, but then we're also helping the organization as well. And it's both virtual and in person. It's 3 days. We bring people from outside the field as well, so we don't, just live in a bubble, but we kind of like to stir the pot and get, thinking about things or see things that we haven't thought about before. Um, and again, the reason is because the turnover numbers are devastating. They're not even poor, they're just devastating. And that's not even talking about the lack of pipeline that we have and what we could do for that, but just the turnover itself is unacceptable. And so, and there's solutions. And so I'm created this space so that we can intentionally focus and ignore all the other distractions and just really have a conversation with the same purpose and the same goal in a community where people have the same mission. And so, yeah, it'll be the 3rd year, and we're looking forward to it. There's going to be event podcast. We're going to have our sponsors give resources to free things. I know, Scott, you offer free CUs, so we can put that in a resource page as well for our attendees. We're really trying to give as much as we can for people who are looking for the solutions.
Yes. And quickly, launching a conference or a summit, whatever you call it, but an event like that takes something. And what have you learned about leadership in causing this?
Oof. Yeah. So as an autistic and ADD person, ADHD person, my executive functioning skills are not great. And it is very much required when you're putting on a conference, and especially when it's, you and maybe a couple other people.
Yeah.
So I've really learned about my leadership, or what I've taken away from this is to identify my gaps early and be honest, and look for somebody who's better at doing what I can't do, and then have them lead that. And be there for support, obviously, but not being afraid to hand something off and not need to micromanage it. Just finding the right person at the end of the day to support the needs that I lack. Is one thing, for sure. And then listening to people, and hearing what their needs are, not only my things of what I think that the field needs in general in this area, but talking to individuals like yourself, or talking to, when I'm interviewing, and asking people what they think is missing for them. So really looking outward to people to help guide what topics are needed, has been another thing that I think has helped me and strengthened me as a leader.
Yeah, I love it. What I can hear in that is really attending to what's needed, and attending in a lot of different ways, like paying attention to myself and where in my life do I see breakdowns, and what's needed there. In some cases, another person who is good at managing things like that, right? And then in creating an event, listening for the needs of just the field and the realm or area of the world where you're looking to make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a gift. It's hard. It's a lot of work. Shout out to Kayla who helps me. And it's volunteers as well. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but absolutely worth it.
Awesome. Two questions I like to ask people to wrap up. Tell me something you're proud of.
I was having a coughing fit. Can you repeat that?
Two questions I love to ask people to wrap up. Tell me something you're proud of.
Mm. Yeah, I'm proud of living my mission, and showing up even though it is difficult, to say the
Mm,
very least.
awesome. And my last question is, how can people reach you?
Sorry, now I'm thinking I should have said my children. But yeah, people can reach me on LinkedIn, Holli Beth Clauser, CLAUSER. That's where I normally live, is there. You can also check out my website at www, whatever, three W's, ABACaresstaffing.com. And yeah, connect with me. If you look at my LinkedIn, I will ask you to follow me and connect. So don't be shy.
Awesome. Holli Beth, thank you so much for taking the time to share some of your insights with us today, and who you are and what you're about and the difference you make.
Thanks
And
for having me.
yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. And for those of you listening and watching, thank you for listening and watching. As usual, don't leave without, pressing all the up buttons, like 5 stars, etc. Follow. And this wraps up this episode. We will see you back here next time on The Flex.